The second artist in our profile is the sculptor Mo Jupp, who, having trained at Camberwell Art School and the Royal College as a sculptor, was much influenced by Cycladic and Ferotic art and the work of sculptors like Alberto Giacometti. He very soon chose to use clay as his main medium, with its limitless ability to form soft and fluid shapes. Like all artists, he sets out to accomplish certain things, to formalize ideas, yet always ready to allow inspiration or the happy accident to point in a new direction. Although not a vessel maker, he is still very conscious of the hollow form and works within the confines of traditional mores, manipulating the clay to solve problems and enclose space. Like Phil Rogers, Mo Jupp's work is functional in the sense that it fulfills his objectives, is domestic in scale, and reflects his concerns with the relationships of surface, form, tension, and volume.
What I do is decide what pose I'm going to pick up, and so what I do is I collect photographs of poses that I think are really interesting. So I collect photographs of figures that I might need, and that one I thought was particularly aggressive. That one is sort of submissive. There's a quality about it that's quite interesting. It's a figure I was interested in doing. I was curious about how legs work, because the big problem here is that I can't really afford to pay a model, so I have to look for other methods. I mean, I know what she's doing behind because that's fairly obvious, but I need some sort of suggestion about where legs meet and how they meet, because they don't necessarily meet in a proper, in a sort of an understandable way. There was a quality in the way the legs, the way she's standing, that I thought was actually quite interesting. I like that hip, and there's sort of a straightness there, and you can never ever really sort of see that on yourself. I sort of quite like that because of that knee. It's sort of there's a quality in that knee, and I then decided I saw this photograph and I thought it was really beautiful, and it reminded me of something that I'd picked up on the Thames, or about, I don't know, 9-10 years ago, which was really rather beautiful. And the strange thing about it was I saw it as it is now, in a peculiar way. It's got, in a funny way, it's got all of the qualities that I require from the figure. It's hollow, it's got terrific sort of volume, which means that there's too much volume inside, in a peculiar way. It's terrifically tense, but the beautiful thing about it was that it's not what it seems. It's in fact a clay pipe. I want sometimes to make something that's aggressive, so I need to look at aggression, see what shape aggression is. Sometimes I might want to make something that's passive, and I need to know what passivity looks like. So I get a lot of my information from supermarkets, waiting to pay. And there's quite an interesting scenario that happens if a woman is with a child and she's standing sort of, in a fairly relaxed manner, like she's all of her weight on her right leg and the other leg is sort of relaxing in front of her. She has a very, very different posture because she's safe, because she's got a child with her, than a woman who's standing on her own in exactly the same position. Because a woman on her own is tense and on guard. And there's another scenario where you've got a woman standing in exactly the same position again, weight on her right foot and left leg relaxed, but she's talking to a fellow. And there's a very, very different sort of top half, top body half, top half of the body attitude that's really interesting. And it's almost like 2 inches.
So you're studying the body language all the time?
Yeah, and that I find crucial. So I need then to, if I see aggression, or if I see a photograph of aggression, you can actually almost calculate what's going to come next. It's very interesting. And those are the things that I use. My big problem is that I make a piece that is sort of hesitant. I decide I'm going to make something that's got this hesitant quality about it, and when I fire it, it moves in the kiln. It comes out aggressive. That when you look at a piece of material that's laid out on the floor and you cut a sleeve pattern, it's a seriously outrageous shape. And I could never really come to terms with the fact it was going to work. And it's always been sort of like a bit like magic, which is really nice. It's a bit like a do-it-yourself thing, isn't it? There'll be thousands of these being produced. But then that becomes So what I'm trying to do is trying to find out where the legs actually go, because the photograph I've got isn't explanatory enough. I need to know what that leg does, whether it comes straight up, leans this way, leans forward. So I'm standing in the most comfortable position I can. This leg is coming off at quite a strong angle, and it's also leaning backwards, I think. This one, in the photograph, looks like it's upright, but in reality it's dropping backwards towards the centre of gravity. So I just need to establish, those things, and also what the knee's doing. The knee's pointing away, that I assume that the knee was pointing that way, but in reality it's pointing that way. So once I've established where those things are, then the thing will actually stand, because if I can stand, it can stand, more or less. Then I just make a pile of those. Not all the same. I suddenly realised that there were these marks from the wood grain showing, and they were actually quite descriptive. They were making some quite interesting forms, and they did actually describe movement. So I've looked round for something to give me those sort of qualities. Sorting out how I'm going to get from the floor and keep those legs. I've got to triangulate here, but that's a really important line. I mean, I get really the ankle, but that line there is really seriously important. But then so is that one. So I'm going to try and formulate some method of getting from there to there, and keeping all the bits that I need. This is an important bit, because this is where one of the major joints is going to come. I mean, I can still fiddle about with it a bit to get the sort of legs the way I want them. I'll have to wait now until that gets a little bit harder, and then I'll put the separator on and carry on building. It's sort of fairly sturdy, but it's not that sturdy. What I'm doing is I'm arriving in a situation where I've got the piece, and I'll get up to a certain height, and then I can manipulate the thing, because it's all still soft, and get it right. And then when it dries, I take the piece to pieces, and when I do come to make the bigger piece, I know what that bit's doing. Right. It's very important that I get that. If I'm making a 6-foot piece, it's very important that I get the first movement of the leg in the right position, because if I don't, I end up with another figure.
So you're making an exact copy of the maquette? As near as you can?
As near as I can, yeah. I mean, it's never an exact copy, but it's usually more or less right.
Do you always work that way, or do you ever go straight into a big piece?
No, I very rarely go into a big piece as such, because it seems not to... It's very tricky making a big piece. It's
presumably the principle is the same, the way of building the construction.
Yeah. It seems to, it never does what you think it does. It never seems to do what I think it does. All sorts of other things start happening.
Do you allow that quality to take over, so that it builds itself in a sense?
Yes, I mean, I think, at one point it rather has to do that. I've said this to people in the past, that what actually happens is I start making and I'm curious to see how I sort it out, which means that I've got a sort of vague control, but not total. And there are always problems. And there was a time when I was working flat out for exhibition, where I was getting sort of out-of-body experiences, where I was making something, and I was standing by the side of myself saying, "That's a problem. You've got a real problem there." And then I'd sort of I'd try and sort the problem out, and I'd stand there and say, and I found myself back in this other figure again, saying, "That's not working." It's really weird, but that was when I was sort of really extreme. And that was, it was very funny. I knew I was doing it as well. This is what I've done. So what I've got is I've got clay, paper, or wet paper and clay, and it has to be wet so it all sticks together. And now I've got to cut round it, and that forms the base, or the beginning of the next stage. Just really just patching up holes.
Does the difficulty of balance create a tension in the figure that it's part of the structure?
Yeah, it really has to balance for all sorts of reasons. Well, the obvious one is that it's it'll fall over if it doesn't balance. I know when I look at a figure, I tend to look at its head first, and I don't necessarily want to do that. What I'm really interested in is the way it stands, and what it's saying with the way it's standing. And it seems to me that to come on from somewhere else is to obscure what it is you're about. Very casual. It's usually the whole thing really centres around the top half of the body. That seems to be the bit that seems to determine what it is you're discussing. There's no doubt there's a reason. what it needs, one of those. And I've got to try and cut this form. This is again this is a sort of dressmaking business. I've got to try and cut the form so it sits snugly without forcing it. It's got to fit around that way, over that way, and over that way all at the same time. So I mean, the nice thing about clay is that you can actually fiddle with it. Nice when it sort of sits itself down easily. That's all I'm doing now is trying to secure it to the slab underneath. Because it's just, I mean, it's just sort of there on a spit and a promise. Finished.
Tell us something about the sources that have affected you and your work, Mo, since you began this series.
Well, it's things like, I mean, there's obvious Egyptian connection, and I've been looking a lot at Indian sculpture, and really I just look around me. I mean, I was at a pop concert last night and I saw some things there that I thought were really interesting, and I quite like that sort of extravagance, you know, of certain things happening. It took me a long time to actually come to terms with Indian sculpture, because it's so incredibly erotic, and for some reason I quite like their really austere Egyptian stuff. There's something I like that, really sort of austere, very quiet, very solid, and by solid I mean very correct manner of doing things. You know, there was a sort of hierarchy that was very, very strong. But the Indian stuff was like really outrageous, and that's becoming much more interesting. Some of the stuff that I made for the show in Bath, the last two pieces I made were very, very Indian. I mean, I didn't know it at the time. It's looking at the pieces now, they're very they've got a very strong Indian influence, and I don't know where that. I mean, I know where it came from, but it wasn't necessarily a conscious decision. It was just something that happened. I find it very, very difficult to make, heavy limbed pieces, for no reason apart from I just find it very difficult. It's not that I don't like heavily, big girls or anything silly like that. It's just that I just find it very, very difficult to make something that is that's got that sort of quality to it.
Would you suggest a sort of Giacometti-esque sort of feel to the figures? Do you feel influenced by?
Oh yeah, there's no question. I mean, I positively set out at one point to make a piece that was directly influenced by Giacometti. I actually, got the book out and picked a piece and made it ceramically, as opposed to the way he made it, which was, I mean, he worked very much solid at taking away, and I can't work that way. I mean, I don't work that way. A lot of my business is to do with hollow, So the piece had to be hollow. And that's the bit, I suppose, at the end of the day, that really sort of interests me, that there is a degree of hollowness about things. I see things as sort of hollows. It suddenly dawned on me that I could do what I wanted with clay.
Because you do have some things cast in bronze, don't you?
Yes, I have done, yes. Yeah. I don't like bronze. I mean, that's the other surprising thing, is that
You like the clay quality?
clay absorbs light, and bronze reflects it. And when I was searching around for a formula, I suddenly realised it was in my hands, because I smoked cigarettes. I'd got, and I sort of fiddle all the time, and I sort of squash things about. I suddenly realised that my cigarette, in fact, was almost an archetypal form. So I then looked for ways of using that.